great weekend, and thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Rachel is still under the weather, but we have some big news breaking tonight. So big that we will be hearing from Rachel herself. That's in a few moments. It is Friday night, and the AP is reporting the Russia probe is widening. Special counsel Robert Mueller, including in his Russia inquiry a once separate criminal probe into Paul Manafort, former Trump campaign chair, and that probe could include Trump's Justice Department if necessary. We have more on that unusual detail in a moment. But as for Manafort, his foreign political work has, of course, been widely reported. NBC, for example, confirming the prosecutors have reviewed his advocacy for pro-Kremlin forces in Ukraine. And that came before he linked up with Trump in 2016. Now, Manafort's once secret foreign payments from a pro-Putin dictator's party surfaced right before he split with the Trump campaign. The AP now reporting that Mueller will include that review of Manafort into this wider Russia probe. Now, that's not great news for the Trump White House, but it does not automatically undercut their argument that Trump has eliminated his ties to Manafort and that this review might have little to do with the core of the 2016 campaign for president. The other part of the AP report does name check current senior Trump officials, however, including the man who just picked Mueller for this job. Take a look at this tonight. The AP reporting that the special counsel here, Mueller, may expand his inquiry to include the top two DOJ officials, Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein. And they sent that now discredited letter recommending that Trump fire Jim Comey for one reason, that Comey was allegedly unfair to Hillary Clinton, which President Trump later said was not the real or only reason he fired Comey. Rosenstein wrote a memo, and both he and Sessions discussed that firing with Trump, despite Sessions' pledge to recuse himself from the Russia probe. Trump officials suggested that letter caused the firing, but then Trump, of course, admitted that was not true in an interview with NBC's Lester Holt.
Did you ask for a recommendation?
What I did is I was going to fire Comey. My decision. It was not.
You had made the decision before they came in the room.
I was going to fire Comey. There's no good time to do it, by the way.
Because in your letter you said I accepted their recommendation,
yeah, well,
so you had already made the decision.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was really
he made a recommendation. He's highly respected, very good guy, very smart guy. The Democrats like him, the Republicans like him. He made a recommendation, but regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
Now, that interview, when you listen to it, it did more than just throw the Justice Department under the bus. It made the Justice Department vulnerable, at least, to an allegation that it was part of an effort to mislead the whole nation about the first firing of an FBI director without cause in American history. That's a big deal. And a lot of that is still reverberating. As you know, within days, Rosenstein responded to that by appointing Mueller as this special counsel. And then he gave a very unusual private briefing to that bipartisan gathering of the Senate. And then he went quiet. No press releases, no speeches, definitely no media interviews until tonight. Rod Rosenstein spoke to the media for the first time since this all blew up. He spoke about Russia. And he spoke about whether the man he picked to run this inquiry has the authority to potentially investigate him, Rod Rosenstein. Here's what Rosenstein tells the AP tonight. Quote, I've talked with Director Mueller about this. He's going to make the appropriate decisions. And if anything that I did winds up being relevant to his investigation, then, as Director Mueller and I discussed, if there's a need for me to recuse, I will. A spokesman for Mr. Mueller in the article declined to comment. But here's why this all matters, even if this is, to be clear, a hypothetical point. Mueller has independence, but Rosenstein currently oversees him. Rosenstein was involved in, as I was just mentioning, that unusual rollout of a law enforcement firing that at least some people think should be investigated as potential obstruction of justice. But if Mueller goes down that road, can Rosenstein limit his authority? Even if he doesn't, how do you really clearly and forthrightly investigate your own boss? Well, tonight, the news here on the record for the first time in an interview is Rosenstein saying he will get out of the way. He will recuse himself if need be. Now, maybe the Russia probe will die down and none of this stuff that they're putting out will be relevant. Maybe Rosenstein wants a secondary, kind of a public reason not to talk about any of this again. And by calling up the AP on a Friday night and putting this on the record, maybe he thinks that allows him to then say later, for example, to Congress, that this is a matter under potential investigation and he can't discuss it. We've heard those kind of defenses before. Or maybe this is the first of many rounds in the shadow boxing over this increasingly sticky probe, as Mueller makes clear right now that he has a broad mandate, basically daring his boss to disagree. And Rosenstein is saying apparently the right thing before what? Before what we know is coming, the big days of testimony on Capitol Hill, from Jim Comey next week and soon after from Sessions and Rosenstein. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it is a combination of all those dynamics. But after weeks of letters about espionage, anonymous leaks and complaints about those underlying leaks, tonight what we have are at least one major player speaking out under his own name in the light of day. Joining us now, I'm happy to say, is Eric Tucker, the Justice Department reporter for the AP who broke this story. Thanks for joining tonight.
Thank you for having me, Ari. I appreciate it.
You broke this story. It is significant for many reasons. Can you tell us more about how it came together and how it was that Rod Rosenstein basically gave you this first on-the-record interview about this hot topic?
So actually, Rod spoke with a colleague of mine, Sadie Gurman, and it was a conversation, sort of a wide-ranging conversation about some of his priorities as Deputy Attorney General. And during the course of that conversation, he was asked about the scope and the purview of Special Counsel Mueller's mandate, and he acknowledged very honestly that Bob Mueller has a very broad mandate that could include anything that he potentially did. It can include anything that the Attorney General did. And he said, as you indicated a few minutes ago, that if there is anything that Rod Rosenstein himself did that is considered to be relevant to the investigation, he said he'll go ahead and recuse himself.
Eric, that is different than the view of some people inside the Trump White House who publicly opposed any special counsel and certainly have taken the position that whatever the Russia probe is, it should not go into the firing of Jim Comey.
Right. And so actually, when you look at the one-page mandate that was issued several weeks ago by the Justice Department, it clearly gives a fairly sweeping mandate to Bob Mueller. And I think everybody who knows Bob Mueller anticipates that he's going to pull all the relevant strings that he wants to. Clearly, at the sort of focal point of this investigation is the potential collusion between Moscow and the Trump campaign. But that also includes a look at any potential associates of President Trump, which would include his campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. And it could certainly include allegations of perjury, obstruction of justice, or anything of that sort.
In this AP interview, did you get into Jim Comey's coming testimony?
No.
And let me ask you about the Manafort piece of it. What do you see as significant about that? Because, you know, for our viewers, a lot of folks have tracked different people connected to Trump at different times under review. What does it say to you, based on your reporting and your wider knowledge, that this is now under Mueller's purview?
Well, it's interesting because, as you noted, the Manafort investigation long predates the campaign. It long predates the collusion investigation. It is truly operating on a separate track of a criminal financial fraud type investigation. And so clearly, as they're building up their team, as they're developing their resources, as they're gathering steam as part of this investigation, they are looking at all these different sort of outstanding threads and trying to figure out what are the potential ties or connections that would unite all of them under a single person and a single leadership. So in a lot of ways, it's actually not that surprising.
When you look towards Jim Comey's expected testimony this Thursday, for you, what is the biggest question you would have for him or want to hear from him on?
So I think we're going to hear about his encounters that he had with President Trump in the weeks and months that predated his firing. One thing that's really important and interesting about Jim Comey is he is known to have kept actual memos, formal written memos that he would write up after exchanges or encounters that made him uncomfortable. And we know, for instance, that he did this in February after an Oval Office meeting in which he says that President Trump asked him if he would consider ending the investigation into Michael Flynn, who was, of course, President Trump's first national security advisor. I think the Senate's going to be very interested in that, and I think Director Comey, former Director Comey, is going to have a lot of interest in recounting that from start to finish.
Eric Tucker, Justice Department reporter and part of that team that broke the story for the AP tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.